so it's just massively plus EV. I mean, 45 chips doesn't sound like much, but this these dimensions are kind of exaggerated a little bit, so it's probably a bit more than that. And you have the post flop edge where you're going to be in position and just betting them out of the pot constantly because they're just going to be ultra nits. So 3-bet, 3-bet, 3-bet in position. I cannot stress it enough. That is the best way to combat against regs. Moving on, isolating weak limps for sure, and just generally being aggro, blind versus blind against regs. Yeah, Synago regs just do not balance their limping range whatsoever. There's very occasionally I'll see a reg limp aces under the gun or something like that, but I mean they're just folding. Well, they're just having really weak hands just all the time. It's just always going to be a medium pair, maybe like a king queen suited or something like that. The thing is, their range will be very narrow, and for the most part, they're just going to fold your ISO anyway. So you again just show immediate profit, and it's just going to be really difficult for them to play out of position. Again, I'm talking about isolating them in position. So you're just going to make life really miserable for them, and there's just no reason for you to have that limping on your table. If you see those limps, just scoop them up. They're just going to fold. You can even make it 3 big blinds is usually enough to get the job done because they just don't want to play out of position against another decent player. So it's really important. And best part is, even if they do flat, you just have their range nailed down as nothing incredibly strong. I mean, a lot of pocket pairs that you just always bet them off of unless they hit a set, and they'll pretty much always let you know if they do hit a set. So you'll hear from them, and it will be very easy to bet them out of the pot if they do not hit anything. Which again brings me to the next point, just barreling like crazy. Once they go into check call mode, that's just like a green light to just take the pot from them. They're just giving you the pot. If they're checking and calling on a texture where they would just always raise with a strong hand, they're just never going to showdown with it ever. They might call the flop, might even call the turn, but they're never going to make it to showdown. It's just going to be really bad play. After that, this is almost kind of counterintuitive, betting smaller for value and bigger as bluffs. 'Cause usually against fish, you want to do the opposite. The differences with these regs is they don't want to play big pots at all. They're still really in the preservation of chips mode. Just can't play big pots in the early game. You have to save your future edge. So once the bets start getting big and once there's all-ins involved, they just cards the muck like crazy. And for that reason, when you do have your stronger hands and you are betting for value, it makes sense to bet smaller because they're just going to have such a huge folding range that's going to be the only way you can possibly get value. So again, yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive how I usually play against, I don't know, reasonable players, but in this case, I think you should actually bet smaller for value and bigger as bluffs. And I don't want to exaggerate that. It's not like I'm always just shipping it in every time I have a bluff and just min betting when I have a value hand. It's going to be very slight differences. You obviously don't want to give off tells and let people know your bet sizing patterns, etc. Although, as we'll see later on, it appears the regs just really don't pay attention to prior history or take note of things like that. But it's still something to be concerned about for the better players. Moving on. So, pre-flop. So, regs pre-flop are just going to be extremely straightforward. They're going to let you know if they have a hand. They're rarely limping strong. Their 3-bet and 4-bet range is extremely tilted towards value. I mean, and when I say that, I mean kings and aces, basically. 4-bet range, it's just so rare that regs 4-bet light, which is understandable because usually they're 3-betting outrageously tight, so 4-betting over that would be kind of suicide. However, they should definitely be 4-betting light against me because I'm just going to be 3-betting like crazy. And I do have to make an admission. It does help that I played sit and goes for so long, so I've been in the games for years, and I used to have like the crazy tight nitty stats. So a lot of these players have, tens of thousands of hands on me with these tight stats and a 3-bet percentage of, 3% or whatever ridiculous low stat. So it really helps me in my case, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it with a fresh database. You will just have to be kind of wary of people picking up on it, but again, they really don't seem to pick up on it very well. So yeah, 3-bet, 4-bet range, this is going to be so tight. You're just going to, well, the way to play against it is boring, but you should just be folding against them. Pretty simple really, but that's the way to combat it. They're going to be raised folding a huge percentage of hands as well, particularly in late position, and this goes back to the 3-betting pre-flop. That's how you take advantage of it. In addition, you want to 3-bet a very polarized range. Reason being is when they do 4-bet, it's always just going to be the nuts, basically. So you don't want to be 3-betting a hand that has decent equity that you're now having to give up. You want to be 3-betting, the crappy hands that play well enough post-flop, but you're definitely not going to cry if you have to fold it pre-flop. So that's the reason in this situation you want to have a polarized range. Types of hands I 3-bet light. Well, because their ranges are so tight, and their 4-bet range particularly is so tight, card removal actually plays a really big factor. When their 4-bet range is aces and kings, and you have ace-2, you just knocked out a big chunk of their range, as absurd as it sounds. So using, like ace-2 suited, ace-5 suited, obviously being suited helps, even like king-7 suited, even has card removal working for it a little bit. Other than that, as I showed you earlier, you can 3-bet any 2 cards and show immediate profit. So you can 3-bet surprisingly wide until they start to pick up on it. You just can't get too carried away. And again, combating their tight 3-bet, 4-bet range is just to, play tight. You're definitely not going to be 4-bet shipping it in light or 5-bet shipping it in light until they prove that themselves can 3-bet or 4-bet light. It does leave opportunity for, set mining against their stronger hands, but in reality, I don't really recommend it that often because, again, they're just going to be folding post-flop so much, it's going to be really nitty, and they're just looking to make those hero folds all the time, whether it's due to just not wanting to think about it, they're playing too many tables and don't want to focus on it, laziness, or they just don't know any better. I don't know, but they're just going to be super nitty, and it's going to be hard to get value from them when you do hit a set. And typically, this is obviously really situational, but typically it's not worth it to set mine a lot of spots where I see Regs set mine. Moving on. Unbalanced ranges. Okay, so post-flop, they're very often folding the top of the range. Well, they're basically folding their entire range. So you can really take advantage of this. Basically, you just have to not be afraid to ship it in on the river. Sometimes you're going to 3-barrel. Sometimes it will get called and bust. It'll happen, but you're just going to make so many chips in the long run just because there's literally so many spots on the river where they just do not have a calling range. They'll peel one on the flop and they're like, okay, call on the turn. And river, they're just folding so often. Reason being is because they're vehemently against slow playing. They want to play their hands fast. They want to reduce variance to the lowest amount possible, and they don't want to play a big pot without the pure nuts, basically. So to combat this, you make them play a big pot without the pure nuts and make them fold, essentially. More unbalanced ranges. Again, I talked about this earlier. They never limp strong hands. I should say, extremely rarely limp strong hands. Particularly blind versus blind. Having a reg limp into your blind is just free money all the time, and you don't even have to make it big. I mean, depending on stack sizes, if you're at 10-20, I would usually make it, 60 or even 50 would be sufficient. But say you're at 100, 200, and you have 15 big blinds, you can make it. You can basically min raise back. They limp for 200. You can make it like 420. They're getting 3-1 odds, but they'll be out of position, and you'd be amazed how much they fold. And if not, just fold the flop. They're just really, really easy to take advantage of blind versus blind, because again, they're just never limping strong hands. They're just going to limp and fold a huge frequency of the time,